Hello everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, Why You Need Civil AccuDraw. My name is Derek Gray. I'm the Product Manager for Bentley Civil Americas, and I'll be your presenter. Now, as we all know, the identifying and placing of points are an intrinsic part of any civil model. When you think about it, points make up a part, or at least a part, of nearly every geometric construction. For example, the start and end points of both horizontal and vertical lines and arcs. They identify survey features. They locate drainage structures. They delineate the vertices of terrain triangles. And MicroStation offers a variety of standard graphical snapping conventions that can be very helpful and very useful when it comes to locating or identifying these points. However, many times we'll find that these basic snapping tools are not sufficient when you want to do more advanced placements. Now, in cases where these standard graphical snapping conventions in MicroStation are not enough, the MicroStation AccuDraw tool provides us with additional capabilities. AccuDraw allows the user to provide precision input of point parameters such as coordinates, distance, direction, as well as providing point input based on relationships with other points or geometric entities. For example, I may want to place a point a certain distance and direction from another MicroStation point, or maybe, for example, I want to do it at a certain offset from a specified MicroStation line. So Civil AccuDraw allows us to provide that input at the same time providing it based on relationships with other points or MicroStation elements. However, as useful as AccuDraw is, it has limitations in the civil world. For example, it's not able to recognize civil geometry, therefore it's not able to interpret civil information such as station and offset from a specified baseline. So what is Civil AccuDraw? Well, Civil AccuDraw is designed to replicate those portions of the MicroStation AccuDraw command which are relevant to a civil workflow, at the same time expanding those capabilities to identify and locate points based on civil constraints and civil input. Now, what Civil AccuDraw does not do is that it does not create any elements. It's not going to draw lines or arcs or shapes or curves or anything like that. It's used in the creation of elements, but in and of itself it does not create or draw anything. It only feeds input to other commands which in themselves create elements. Let's begin with the basics of Civil AccuDraw, and specifically how to activate it, control it, and customize it. You can activate the Civil AccuDraw toolbar in a couple of ways. First, from the main Tools menu in MicroStation, you can drop down and you'll see Civil AccuDraw, and you'll have the option to activate the toolbar. You also have options there to access Civil AccuDraw settings as well as the shortcuts. In addition, you can bring up the AccuDraw toolbar from the Civil Task Navigation menu, specifically the one under General Geometry. The Civil AccuDraw toolbar can be docked. Keep in mind that it provides access to all the Civil AccuDraw functions. And another thing that's important is that to keep in mind the toolbar will change based on the focused view. So for example, if the view that you have in focus is the 2D plan, the Civil AccuDraw toolbar will update to give you specific options for 2D. If you're in a profile model view, it will update to give you options for profiles. And if you're in a 3D view, it will again update to give you options specific to 3D. Here in this video, we'll show that. The first thing I want to do is go to the Civil Task Navigation under the General Geometry, and you'll see Activate the Civil AccuDraw toolbar. And I'll do that, and you can see there in the default 3D view it's popped up. Just as an aside, keep in mind from the Tools drop down in MicroStation, you can also access this as well. Now, notice I'm going to come down here under Horizontal Geometry, and I'm going to say Place a Line. And notice that my focus is in the 2D view. So I get things like X, Y. Notice over on the toolbar I can also change to station offset mode, a delta station, distance offset, distance direction. Now if I want to go into the profile view, let's say for example I want to place a profile line between points, If I go to the profile view and put my focus on that view, it will actually change to give me profile options such as station and slope, station and Z or elevation. You also have a delta Z in station, and you have other options such as profile offset. The same thing goes now if I put my focus on the 3D view. You'll notice the toolbar changes to give me options for 3D. Another way to access the different settings for the Civil AccuDraw, it can again be done in two ways. First, from the main tools menu, you've got the Civil AccuDraw settings. If you actually have the Civil AccuDraw toolbar open, the second icon from the left will give you the access to the Civil AccuDraw settings. Now once you bring up the settings dialog, you'll notice that it's very similar to the MicroStation AccuDraw. For example, they both have an operation tab, which gives you access to such things as whether you want to enable auto load or floating origin. They both have a display tab, which allow you to control the settings of the heads-up dynamics. And they both have a coordinates tab, which allow you to control things such as the round-offs for things such as distance, angle, station, and offset. However, you'll notice that in the Civil AccuDraw settings, you have a fourth tab, which is your favorites. This allows the user to create user-customized methods. So for example, by hitting the Add button, I've created one called My Favorite. Now I can set up what I want my ordinate 1 to be, whether I want it to be the X coordinate, the distance, direction, station, offset, etc. I can also supply the second ordinate and give it a specific icon and then add it to my own list of favorites. Now these are all the horizontal methods that are supported in Civil AccuDraw. You have XY, you have DX and DY, which is delta X and delta Y. You also have delta station. You have direction. You have DY, which is delta Y, as we just mentioned. You have station. You have offset. You have D offset, which is delta offset, and then you have distance. In the vertical, you have such access to methods such as Z, which is elevation, slope, delta Z, and profile offset. Just as a heads up, all the settings are detailed in the Civil Tools help. So the purpose of today's presentation is not so much to go in and detail every single functionality of Civil AccuDraw. It's to kind of give you a 10,000-foot view to kind of show you why it's be very useful to you. So we would recommend that you go to the Civil Tools help and go to Civil AccuDraw and review the different options and methods that are available to you. A couple other things that you'll need to be aware of and some additional settings. Under Workspace Preferences, View Options Civil, you'll see the Cursor Prompt Dialog settings. Now these settings allow you to control the look and feel of the cursor prompt dialog. For example, if you're in a black background, you might want the dialog to be white, whereas if you're using a white background, you might want your dialog to be darker to be easier to see. Also, under the Settings, Design File, Civil Settings, there's some settings that would be very useful to you. For example, the first one is Coordinate Settings, where you control, for example, your format, whether it's X, Y, or northeast, and you also control the precision of those coordinates. Also, under the Design File Civil Formatting Settings are the Profile Slope Settings, which allow you to control the slope formats as well as the precision. You also have there the station settings, which allow you to control the format of your stationing, the delimiter, and the precision, and then how your equations are going to be handled. And for certain methods such as delta X, delta Y, delta station, length, profile, offset, etc., when you're putting in numbers, keep in mind that if there's not a specific setting for those, that the accuracy or the rounding will be handled by the working unit settings under the Design File dialog. The same thing is true here, for example, with the angle readout. That's controlled, right? And so it doesn't, Civil AccuDraw doesn't have its own option for angle readout. It just uses the MicroStation settings. A couple of tips and tricks when you're using Civil AccuDraw. You'll notice on the screen there that I've got my cursor prompt dialog. If you want to convert that to a fixed box dialog, you can do that by just pressing the down arrow on your keyboard, and the dialog itself will come up. In the same way, if you press the space bar on your keyboard, it will open up a direct pick menu, allow you to change your method as well as have access to the different shortcuts. So why do you need Civil AccuDraw? Well, there's really two things that Civil AccuDraw is going to allow you to do. The first one is it allows you to communicate precision input. As we mentioned with AccuDraw and MicroStation, what it does is it allows you, or as the user, to provide point input. For example, coordinates, distance, direction, station, offset, to any MicroStation or Civil command or construction which requires a point. Now, one thing to note out, even though Civil AccuDraw is geared around Civil commands, it is not limited to Civil commands. It can still be used with any MicroStation command. So the first thing it does for us is communicate precision input. The second thing that it does is it allows us to communicate design intent. Whenever you're using Civil commands with Civil AccuDraw, it takes that input and it uses it to establish rules and relationships on the points. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So this will conclude part one of our presentation, and we'll pick up these two subjects in point two.